Shalom, everyone. At the end of Perek Chizkat HaBatim in page Nuntet and Samech 59 and 60, we hear about Hezek Riyah, damage by sight. And in the discussion, Chazal, actually Rabbi Yochanan is bringing up the image of the character of Bil'am HaRasha. And let's see what's the connection between the two things. And I'm sharing my sources, and let's start. In page 60, the Mishnah says a person may not open an entrance opposite another entrance or a window opposite another window toward a courtyard belonging to the partners, so as to ensure that the residents will enjoy a measure of privacy. And when the Gemara asks, how do we know that halacha? Where do we know that halacha from? From where? From Minahane Mile? From where are these matters? That one may not open an entrance opposite another entrance or a window opposite another window, another window, is being derived, as Rabbi Yochanan says, from the verse, and Bilam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel dwelling tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him, etc. And he said the famous words, Matovu alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. And the Gemara explained what was it that Bilam saw that so inspired him. He saw that the entrance of their tents were not aligned with each other, ensuring that each family enjoys a measure of privacy. And he said, if this is the case, these people are worthy of having the divine presence rest on them. In other words, one of the most significant identification of Am Yisrael, of tzniut, and keeping the privacy of each other, is derived from a sentence that was said by a Gentile prophet, Bil'am Hanavi, Bil'am HaRasha, who was also with one eye, and he is watching the tribes of Israel dwelling in the desert, and he's saying, wow, this is special. You know, Matovu alecha Yaakov, because you're keeping the privacy of each family. And the Gemara in Nuntet, the previous page, is also saying that a person may not open his window into the courtyard belonging to a partner. In other words, we really have to make sure that our doors and that our windows are not facing the private house of or a person. And this is what Bil'am saw at the camp of Am Yisrael. And the Shulchan Aruch, and when it comes to a conclusion of halacha, is saying very, very acute things. A person shall not open a window to his friend's yard, and even one of the partners in the yard who wants to open a window for him inside his house to the yard is prevented by his partner, because he's looking at him from it. Even though the yard is a chatzer shutafim, it belongs to the partners. The minute that you have a window that is looking into my house, this is against the laws of privacy, and it's also against the laws of tzniut, which we'll see in a minute. And continues Shulchan Aruch and says, a person should not open a shop against his friend's door or window, because it is always a permanent harm that the masses pass by and do not always look at him. But he sits in his shop all day and looks at his friend's door or window. Therefore, he should move away to the point where he cannot see him at all. In other words, there's a big emphasis on, it doesn't matter that it's a yard of partners. If you can see your partner's house from your window or door, this is against the privacy, and this is against being humble. It's against tzniut, like Bil'am saw in Am Yisrael, Matovu alecha Yaakov, that they were not facing each other, and that's a measure not only of privacy but also a measure of tzniut. And here, what the Shulchan Aruch is saying, even if you build a shop, and you can see, the owner sit all day by the shop, and he can look over the other side of the street to somebody's house that is also forbidden. Even though we're talking about Reshut Rabim, because the passengers that pass by, they don't pick up their heads and eyes to look directly into the other person's house. But if you build a shop, a chanut, and you're sitting by the entrance of the shop all day, looking everywhere, obviously you'll be able to look inside this apartment opposite the shop, and that's also very forbidden. Matovu alecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Israel, that Rabbi Yochanan is saying that from the words of Bil'am, we are learning how Israel was so private in their homes, and they were never looking into other people's homes, and it became something that is so regular in our mouth to use these words, sometimes maybe even forgetting that these views were said by the prophet who wanted to curse Am Israel. And indeed, there's an interesting machlaket between Chachamim later in history, in the Middle Ages, of is it okay to use these words? What we find in Rav Amram Gaon's Sidur, which is the first Sidur that we have as a book, the first Siddur we have as a book from the 9th century of Ram Amram. And he is writing there in his Siddur, one who enters a synagogue says, how goodly are the tent, O Yaakov, the dwelling, O Israel. This is what we say when we enter shul at the first day, the first time on the morning. And makes a lot of sense. We're entering a place of togetherness, of kinus. And we want to remind ourselves that we need to keep that privacy, that tzniut. Remember what was so good about our dwellings, and keep it also in shul, and keep it also in the community. Um, and but as opposed to what Rav Amram is saying, that he starts his day walking into shul with Matovu Alecha Yaakov, the Maharshal Rabbi Shlomo Luria, who lived in the 16th century in Poland, is opposing that minhag that we know is in the Sidurim of both Sfarad and Ashkenaz. It's been and when it was printed, it spread all over the Jewish world. And the Maharshal is very, very harsh about it. And he says, when I come to synagogue, I begin with a verse, but as for me, in the abundance of the loving kindness, avo betecha eshtechaveh lechat kodeshecha, and I skip the first verse, how goodly are the tents. In other words, in his Siddur, at the 16th century, it says, Matovu alecha Yaakov. And then it says the second verse that people say, Avo betecha eshtechaveh. But he says, I'm skipping Matovu alecha Yaakov. And why is that? Because Balaam said it. And he said it as a curse, as we find in Sanhedrin, and this is not its proper place. Okay, it's not a place for a Jew when he enters shul in the morning to remind himself of a sentence that the Bil'am Rasha said in order to curse the people of Israel. He changed, he said good words, but nevertheless, he's relying on a Gemara in Sanhedrin that said he was really trying to curse us also through that verse, and a Marshal is against that. But as I said before, it is in all our sidurim, and we all say it. Kids are learning to say it. The first thing in Tfilat Shachrit, Matovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkanotecha Yisrael. When we look at the pasuk in its connotation in Sefer Bamidbar in Numbers, and we see the entire thing, it's really, really amazing. As Balak looked up, we're talking about hezek riyah. We're talking about a damage being done by sight. And here Balaam, who is half blind or has one eye, he's using his sight, and he's raising his eyes, and he's looking up, and he saw Israel encamped tribe by tribe. And the Spirit of God came upon him, and taking him up his theme, and he said, word of Bil'am, son of Beor, word of the man whose eye is true. The words, the translation here, whose eye is true, is obviously one interpretation for the Hebrew of a gevel stum ha'ain. But literally, what a gevel stum ha'ain means is the man with a blocked, closed eye. Okay, so his sight is questionable. But here, because God's Spirit is upon him, He's saying the word of one who hears God's speech, he who beholds vision from the Almighty, prostrate, but with eyes unveiled. How fair are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwellings, O Yisrael. Matovo alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Israel. And Rashi, we don't have Rashi on our Gemara, but we have Rashi, of course, on Bamidbar. And Rashi here is saying how good they are. The tent, he said this because he saw because he saw Matova Alecha, he saw the goodness of the tents. But the other thing that Rashi is bringing, another explanation, the tent of Shiloh and the temple, when these flourished, in that sacrifices were in that sacrifice, as were offered therein to atone for you. So in other words, Rashi is saying, yes, he saw two kinds of tents. One is the tents of Israel at the desert and their good dwelling. But there's also tents that are places where God is dwelling. First in Shiloh and then in the Temple Mount in Beit HaMikdash. And these dwellings of God, these flourishing places where God is dwell, is also functioning as the strength of Am Yisrael. So Rashi is saying both the private and the national, the Yachid and the Rabim, the private homes, but also the common Chatzer Shutafim, if we want, what belongs to all of us. And it's a place of is the temple, which is the place of dwelling in the of God, and is a place where we can ask for atonements, and we can where we can feel close to God. The Shnei Luchot Habrit Hashla, which is Rabbi Yeshayahu Horovitz, who lived in Poland, who lived in Israel at the 16th century also. And the Shla is saying something very interesting. He's paying attention to the fact that in Parashat Balak, when we hear the story of Bil'am and wanting to curse and ending up blessing the people, there is no mitzvah. And parasha zo mitzvah mi mitzvah terech. There's no mitzvah in this parasha. You know, when we are used to finding what are the mitzvot in the parashat. So what is the significant? What is the wordings of this parasha that we can learn from? Says the Shla, mikol makom ktiv ba, matovo alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Israel. Yes, that sentence is the most important sentence in this entire parsha, says the Shla Kadosh, and he brings Rashi, who said matovo alecha b'yishuvan, but he also adds the end of a midrash that Rashi is bringing, that the Chazal are saying your dwelling places are good when they're upheld, when they exist, but they're also good when they are in destruction. In other words, we are paying attention, we give respect even to Churbanan, even to cities of Am Yisrael where they were destroyed. We remember the dwelling of the people who were there when everything was good, when everything was flourishing. And we're giving an honor and respect to the memory of the good dwelling of the people, which I think is a very interesting way to look at it. In other words, we are not just looking at what there is, but we're also remembering what there was, hoping that in the future we'll be able to rebuild those good dwellings of Am Yisrael. And what I want to end with another sort of opening. And the Mishnah, the famous Mishnah in Masechet Avot, the first chapter in Mishnah Hey, Yosef ben Yochanan, Ish Yerushalayim Omer, Yehi vetcha fatuach lirvacha v'yu ananim v'nei betecha. It's true that we need to keep our doors and windows not open or not looking into our neighbor's house. This is a Zechariah, and it's against the privacy and the tzniut. But there is but there is a time where our house should be wide open. And Yosef ben Yochanan, the men of Jerusalem, say, may your home be open wide. May the poor be members of your household. In other words, if you shut your door close and you're saying, I'm not looking at them and they should not looking at me, and I'm just being in my own little private place, that is also not good. It's true that you shouldn't open in order to look at your neighbor's house, but you should open your house widely, home widely, in order to bring people who need your help. If your door is closed, nobody's going to ask for help. But if your door is open, people know that they can step in and ask for help. So as with many other things in life, we need to find the balance between having a closed, totally hermetic closed house and a totally open house. Find the time when we need to open in order to help and assist, and when we need to close and keep our eyes away from looking into our neighbors or partners or friends' houses and private homes, and keep their modesty, keep their tzniut, keep our tzniut, keep their privacy, keep our privacy. And maybe with that, we'll be able to, walk into shul and say, Matovu alecha Yaakov, mishkonatecha Israel, even though it was said by Bil'am Harasha. At that time, he had God's wording in his mouth, and he was able to describe the people of Israel in the best way.